This video is about understanding and applying slope on a coordinate plane, determining the distance between two ordered pairs, and finding the midpoint of two ordered pairs, and finding the endpoint of a given midpoint. So a midpoint is a point that divides a segment into two congruent segments. So another way to think about that is a midpoint is dividing a segment in half. To find a midpoint, you are going to take the average of the two numbers. So in a midpoint, when we have coordinates, our midpoint formula is we're going to add the x's and divide by 2, add the y's and divide by 2. Sometimes this will be a whole number, sometimes this will be a fraction. It depends if your numerator is positive or negative after you add the coordinates. So in number 1, if I want to find the midpoint of AB, I'm going to add my x coordinates, which are 3 and 11, and divide by 2. I'm going to add my y coordinates, 7 plus negative 5, and divide by 2. So we get 7, 1. In number 2, to find the midpoint, our x coordinates are negative 4 plus 8 divided by 2. Our y coordinates are 8 plus negative 9 divided by 2. So negative 4 plus 8 is 4 divided by 2 is 2. 8 plus negative 9 is negative 1 divided by 2 leaves us as a fraction of negative 1/2. Now, sometimes we can go the other way where we're given a midpoint and an endpoint, but we need to find the other endpoint. So in order to do that, we can look at how are the x and y coordinate change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a little table. So I'm always going to do endpoint, midpoint, and the endpoint that I am looking for. So the endpoint here is 4, negative 2. The midpoint is 2, negative 6. And we are looking for our other endpoints. So now I'm going to look at how did these numbers change. So for x, how did I get from 4 to 2? Well, I went down, so I subtracted a value of 2. So I'm going to do that again to get our endpoint. So 2 minus 2 gets us an x coordinate of 0. Then for y, how did I get from negative 2 to negative 6? So again, I subtracted 4 here. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to subtract 4. So negative 6 minus 4 is going to be negative 10. You can always double check yourself by using the two endpoints in the midpoint formula to make sure you get back to where you started at an endpoint or at a midpoint. So our answer here then is going to be 0, 10 for point B. In number 4, even though B is the second endpoint, I'm still just going to write my first endpoint that I know at top, then my midpoint, and then my endpoint. So my endpoint is 0, 7, my midpoint is 5, negative 1, and I'm looking for the other endpoint. So how did I get from 0 to 5? Well, I added 5, so I'm going to add 5 again. 5 plus 5 is 10. Our other coordinate, 7, negative 1, we went down 8, so when we go down 8 again, negative 1 minus 8 gets us negative 9. So our A endpoint is going to be at 10, negative 9. In algebra, we talked about slope. So remember that slope compares the rate of change in the coordinate y to the rate of change in the coordinate x. Another way to think about this is we are comparing our rise over our run. We can use slope in a few different ways. So first, we're just going to calculate slope. So when you calculate slope, remember that the slope equation is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So in number 5, if I have my first coordinate, this is x1 and y1. My second coordinate is x2 and y2. So we have 11 minus 10 over negative 6 minus negative 4. That's going to reduce to 10 over negative 2, which reduces to a slope of 5. In number 6, when I go to do my slope, I have 8 minus negative 5 over 7 minus 3, which gets us 13 over 4. If you're not comfortable using the slope equation, you can always set up a table and use your jumps. So if I write my coordinates of 3, negative 5, and 7, 8, I know that my y is changing by plus 13. My x is changing by plus 4. So my slope would be 13 over 4. So it's the same slope either using the slope equation or using a table in your jumps. On a graph, we want to look at our slope going from left to right. So I'm going to make my slope triangle to figure out how much did I go up and over. So in this case, because the line is slanted up, I have a positive slope. So I went up 4 and over 2. So my slope is 4 over 2, which reduces to 2. When we are looking for distance between 2 points, there is a distance formula, which is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. You can also use your slope to find your equation. So in number 8, I have the 2 points 1, 5, and 7, negative 3. So I'm going to plot those points. 1, 5 is A, and 7, negative 3 is B. So I want to find the length of this segment. So I can do it 2 ways. One, I can use the distance formula. So the distance formula is 7 minus 1 squared plus negative 3 minus 5 squared. So we get the square root of 6 squared plus negative 8 squared. 6 squared is 36, negative 8 squared is 64. So when we take the square root of 100, we get 10. The other way to do it is using your slope. So to use your slope formula, if I look at my points, I went down 8, negative 8, and I went over 6. So to find it, I can also do Pythagorean theorem with my square root. So what I could do is I can call that side AB squared is equal to each part of the slope squared. So I have AB squared equals 64 plus 36. AB squared equals 100. So to find the length of AB, when I take the square root of both sides, we get AB is 10. So notice either way is going to work. I usually just stick with the distance formula. In number 9, to find our distance formula. So C is at negative 7, 4. And D is at 3, negative 5. So to do my distance formula, I'm going to subtract my x-coordinates. It really doesn't matter which x-coordinate you use first as long as you keep it the same way for the y-coordinate. So I have 3 minus negative 7 squared plus 4 minus negative 5 squared. So I get 10 squared plus 9 squared, which is 100 plus 81. So I get the square root of 181, which is not a perfect square. So we're going to round to our nearest hundredth, which is 2 decimal places, 13.45. In number 10, with our distance formula, we have x minus x squared plus y minus y squared. So we get negative 2 minus 12 is negative 14 squared plus 8 squared. Negative 14 squared is 196. Remember, anytime you square a negative number, you should get a positive still. So we have 196 plus 64. And when we add those together, we get the square root of 260. So we're going to put that in our calculator and round. So that is going to be 16.12.